Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Call from Hell. The satellite phone buzzed against Preston Marshall's chest as he crouched behind the concrete barrier. AK-47 rounds splintering the wall inches from his head. 3 days deep in Syrian territory, extracting a CIA asset, and now this. He almost ignored it, but the caller ID showed Sheriff's Department, Millbrook County. Home. Marshall, he answered, pressing himself deeper into cover as his team returned fire. Sir, this is Sheriff Matthew Raymond. We found your boy, Nathan, wandering alone in Pine Ridge woods about 2 hours ago. He's safe now, but the sheriff's voice carried weight that made Preston's blood freeze. Says his mama's boyfriend left him there as punishment for breaking something. Kid's been out there since yesterday morning. Preston's world tilted. Nathan was only 8. Yesterday morning meant his son spent a night alone in woods where black bears roamed and temperatures dropped to near freezing. Where is he now? Preston's voice was deadly calm. The tone his team knew meant someone was about to die. Hospital, getting checked over. He's asking for you, sir. Kid says his mama told him you were dead, killed overseas. She didn't even know he was missing. The line went quiet except for gunfire around Preston. Then a crackling sound as the phone changed hands. Preston, Kelly's voice, his wife of 10 years, sounded annoyed rather than worried. Look, I know you're probably busy playing soldier, but this whole thing is blown out of proportion. Sean was just teaching Nathan some responsibility. Sean. Preston's grip tightened on the phone. Who the hell is Sean? My friend. He lives here now. Has for 6 months. Nathan broke his vintage guitar, and Sean felt the boy needed to learn consequences. So he abandoned my son in the woods? It wasn't abandonment. It was, look, honestly, Preston, maybe this is a sign. Nathan's weak, always crying, always needing help. He should have found his way back. Any son of yours should have been stronger. Her voice turned cold. Maybe he's not really yours. Maybe weak blood just can't survive like it should. The words hit Preston like physical blows. This woman, who he'd married, who'd promised to love and protect their child, was essentially saying she wished their son had died in those woods. I'm coming home, Preston said. Don't bother. We don't need you here. We're doing fine without you. The line went dead. Around Preston, the firefight continued, but he felt detached from it. His team leader, Glenn Booker, slid over beside him. Bad news from home. The worst. Preston checked his watch. How fast can we extract? Chopper's inbound, 10 minutes. What? Preston looked at his longtime friend and teammate. Glenn had served with him through 4 deployments, saved his life twice, knew him better than anyone. Someone hurt my son. And my wife. Preston paused, the reality settling in. My wife let them. Glenn's expression darkened. He'd met Kelly, played with Nathan during their last leave. What do you need? Time to think. And maybe your help when we get back. As the extraction helicopter approached, Preston stared at the satellite phone. They had no idea who he really was. Not Sean, not even Kelly. To them, he was just another deployed soldier, far away and helpless. They thought Preston Marshall was some regular army grunt they could manipulate and dismiss. They had no idea Preston Marshall was a ghost, one of 12 men in a unit that didn't officially exist, that handled problems the government needed to disappear. They didn't know about the unmarked graves in 7 countries, the dictators who'd vanished, the terror cells that had simply ceased to exist after Preston visited them. But they were about to learn. Chapter 2. The Ghost's Return. Preston Marshall's official military record listed him as Staff Sergeant, 75th Ranger Regiment, currently deployed to classified locations. What it didn't mention was the decade he'd spent in a program so black it didn't have a name, just a number, Task Force 117. 12 men who solve America's dirtiest problems with methods that would make war criminals flinch. The flight home gave him 18 hours to think, and Preston Marshall was at his most dangerous when he had time to think. He'd met Kelly Walton at a military wives support group, Mixer, 8 years ago. She'd seemed perfect, beautiful, supportive, claimed she understood the military life. They'd married within 6 months. Nathan came a year later, and Preston had believed he'd found something real, something worth protecting. Now, replaying conversations and memories through the lens of betrayal, warning signs emerged like a photograph developing. The way she'd always pushed for more life insurance. Her odd questions about his work, his teammates, his schedule. The recent insistence that he shouldn't bother calling so often. Preston's phone contained 67 missed calls from Sheriff Raymond, but none from Kelly. Not one call asking if he'd gotten the message about Nathan. Not one expression of concern for their son. Touching down at Dover Air Force Base, Preston immediately called Sheriff Raymond back. "Mr. Marshall, thank God. How soon can you get here? I'm stateside now. How's Nathan? Physically, he's fine. Mentally," the sheriff paused. "This boy's been through hell. Not just the Woods incident. Sir, I need to ask you some questions about your home situation." 2 hours later, Preston sat across from Sheriff Raymond in the Millbrook County Sheriff's Office. Nathan was in the next room, being cared for by a victim's advocate. "Your son's been telling us things," Sheriff Raymond said carefully. "About this Sean character. About your wife. I need to know, did you give permission for another man to discipline your child?" "I've never heard of Sean until yesterday." "What kind of discipline?" Sheriff Raymond slid a folder across the desk. "Photos from the hospital. Your son has old bruises, Mr. Marshall. Healed ones and fresh ones. The doctors say the pattern suggests regular physical punishment over months." Preston opened the folder and felt something dark and cold settle in his chest. Nathan's small body was mapped with bruises in various stages of healing. Handprints on his arms. Belt marks on his back. "The boy's afraid to go home," Sheriff Raymond continued. "Keeps asking if his mama will be angry that he told people about the rules." "What rules?" "Sean's rules. No crying. No asking for help. No telling anyone outside the house about family business. And if Nathan broke any rules..." Sheriff Raymond gestured to the photos. Preston closed the folder, his hands steady despite the rage building inside him. "Where are they now? Your wife and this Sean fellow?" "They're at your house. Been there all day." "Sir, I have to ask, did you know about any of this?" "No." Preston met the sheriff's eyes. "I've been deployed for 8 months. Last time I was home, none of this was happening. We need to charge this Sean with child abuse. Potentially your wife too, for allowing it. But I need to know, are you looking for custody of your son?" Preston thought about Kelly's words on the phone. "He should have been dead. I don't want a loser's blood." "Yes, full custody. And Sheriff, I want to know everything about Sean. Everything." An hour later, Preston sat with Nathan in a small room designed to be comforting for children. His son looked thin, scared, older than his 8 years. "Daddy? Mama said you were dead." Preston knelt down to Nathan's level. "I'm not dead, son. I'm here now. Sean said soldiers like you die because you're weak. He said if I was really your son, I wouldn't be weak either." Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. "But I am weak, Daddy. I couldn't find my way out of the woods." Preston gathered his son into his arms, feeling the boy's fragile frame, the way he flinched at sudden movements. "You're not weak, Nathan. You're 8 years old. You survive a night in the woods alone. Most grown men couldn't do that. Sean says. Sean is wrong about everything." Preston pulled back to look Nathan in the eyes. "And he's never going to hurt you again. I promise you that." It was a promise Preston Marshall intended to keep, no matter what it cost. Chapter 3. Gathering Intelligence. Preston spent the night in a motel, Nathan safely sleeping beside him. By morning, he'd made 17 phone calls and learned everything there was to know about Sean Knapp. Sean Knapp, 34, originally from Detroit. Dishonorable discharge from the Army after 2 years for assault on a fellow soldier. 3 arrests for domestic violence, 2 convictions. Currently unemployed, but driving a new pickup truck and living in Preston's house, supporting himself on Kelly's nurse's salary and what appeared to be Preston's direct deposit military pay. But the most interesting detail came from Glenn Booker, who'd made some calls of his own. "Your boy Sean's been busy," Glenn reported over an encrypted call, "talking to people about a military wife whose husband's got life insurance worth $500,000. Been asking around about how to contact overseas bases, how deployment notifications work." Preston felt pieces clicking into place. "He's trying to figure out how to make me disappear permanently. Gets better. Your wife's been to a lawyer. Filed preliminary divorce papers 3 months ago. But here's the kicker. She listed you as missing in action, presumed dead. The picture crystallized. Kelly and Sean weren't just having an affair. They were actively working to erase Preston from existence, legally and literally. The abuse of Nathan wasn't just cruelty, it was elimination of evidence. If Nathan disappeared too, there'd be no one to contradict their story of the grieving widow whose husband and son died overseas. I need surveillance on my house, Preston told Glenn. And I need it yesterday. Already done. Russ Ward's got eyes on them. You want to know what they're doing right now? Preston checked his watch. 10 a.m. Tell me. Your wife's at work. Sean's in your house, going through your personal effects. Looks like he's boxing things up. Also looks like he's moved completely into your bedroom. Preston closed his eyes, feeling the familiar cold focus that came before a mission. Any weapons in the house? Sean's got a handgun. Carried it outside twice this morning. Seems comfortable with it. Your wife gets home at 6. They're planning something for tonight. We intercepted a text about finishing preparations. For what? Don't know yet. But Preston, Glenn's voice carried concern. These people aren't just greedy. They're dangerous. The way they've manipulated the situation, the abuse of your son, the legal maneuvering, this is sophisticated. Sean might be a grunt, but someone's helping them think this through. Preston looked at Nathan, still sleeping in the motel bed. His son's face was peaceful for the first time since Preston had arrived. The boy felt safe now, protected, and Preston intended to make sure he stayed that way. I need to see them, Preston said. Tonight, face to face. Preston, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. They think I'm some harmless deployed soldier they can manipulate. They have no idea what I am or what I'm capable of. Preston's voice carried the deadly calm his targets used to hear in their final moments. It's time they learned. That afternoon, Preston drove past his own house for the first time in 8 months. From the outside, it looked normal, same blue shutters, same white fence he'd painted before his last deployment. But now it felt contaminated. Sean Knapp's black pickup sat in Preston's driveway like a declaration of conquest. Through the front window, Preston could see a man moving around inside. His house, his sanctuary, defiled. Preston parked down the street and watched. At 6:15, Kelly's Honda pulled into the driveway. Preston studied his wife as she got out of the car. Same auburn hair, same graceful movements. But when she walked inside and immediately kissed the man waiting for her, Preston saw her clearly for the first time. Kelly Walton Marshall was beautiful, charming, and utterly without conscience. The way she moved through what had been their home, the casual intimacy with Sean, the complete absence of any concern for her missing son, it painted a picture of someone who'd never been the woman Preston thought he'd married. At 7 p.m., Preston walked up to his own front door and knocked. Sean opened it, confident and smirking until he saw Preston's face. Then his expression shifted to something between fear and aggression. You must be the husband, Sean said, not moving aside. Kelly's told me all about you. Preston looked past Sean into his own living room. His furniture remained, but Sean's belongings were scattered throughout. The family photos were gone. In their place hung a picture of Kelly and Sean together, both smiling, both very much at home. Where's my son? Preston asked quietly. Safe, Sean replied, chest puffing out. Safer than he was before. Kid needed real discipline, real guidance. Not some part-time father who abandons his family for months at a time. Kelly appeared behind Sean, sliding her arm around his waist in a gesture of territorial possession. Preston, you actually came. Of course I came. Someone abandoned my 8-year-old son in the woods. Kelly shrugged. Nathan needed to learn consequences. In the real world, weakness gets you killed. Preston studied their faces, Sean's aggressive smugness, Kelly's cold indifference. These people had tortured his child and felt no remorse. Had planned to erase Preston from existence and felt entitled to do so. Can I come in? Preston asked. This is still my house. Sean blocked the doorway. Actually, it's not. Kelly's filing papers. This is her house now. Her choice who lives here. And you chose him, Preston said to Kelly. I chose a real man, Kelly replied. Someone who's here. Someone who can provide real security, real leadership. Not some weekend warrior playing soldier. Preston smiled, the smile that had been the last thing 17 men had ever seen. You think I'm playing soldier? Something in his tone made Sean step back slightly. But Kelly seemed oblivious to the danger. I know exactly what you are, Preston. A disappointment. A failure as a husband and father. Nathan deserves better. I deserve better. Preston nodded thoughtfully. You're right about one thing, Kelly. You both deserve exactly what's coming to you. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sean, you might want to sleep with one eye open. The real world you mentioned? I own it. As Preston walked away, he heard the door slam behind him. But he also heard Sean's voice, sharp with new fear. Kelly, what did you tell me about his job? Exactly what does he do overseas? Preston smiled again as he got in his car. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4, Building the Web. Preston Marshall hadn't survived a decade in the world's most dangerous places by being impulsive. Revenge was like any other operation. It required intelligence, planning, and precise execution. From his motel room, Preston established a command center. 3 laptops, encrypted communication gear, and a secure connection to resources that didn't officially exist. By morning, he knew more about Sean Knapp and Kelly Marshall than they knew about themselves. Sean's finances told an interesting story. Despite being unemployed, he'd made significant cash deposits over the past 6 months, always under the $10,000 reporting threshold, always in different branches. His new truck was purchased with cash. So were several expensive gifts for Kelly. Someone's bankrolling him. Glenn observed over their secure connection. Question is who? Preston pulled up Sean's phone records. Look at this pattern. Same number called him every Tuesday and Friday for 4 months. Call stopped 2 weeks ago. Right around when the abuse of Nathan escalated, Glenn noted. Maybe Sean was getting paid to play house. And when the money stopped, he got frustrated. The number traced to a disposable phone. But Preston had resources beyond normal law enforcement. Within 6 hours, he had a name. Donald Clark, former Army military intelligence, dishonorably discharged for selling classified information. This gets deeper. Preston told Nathan that afternoon as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. The boy was staying another day for observation, which gave Preston time to work. Daddy, are you really going to make them go away? Nathan asked quietly. Preston knelt down to his son's level. Nathan, some people in this world are bad. They hurt others and don't feel sorry about it. When someone hurts my family, I make sure they can't hurt anyone else ever again. Like a superhero? Preston considered this. Something like that. But superheroes have rules. I don't. That evening, Preston paid a visit to Donald Clark's apartment in Richmond. Clark answered the door expecting someone else. His face went white when he saw Preston. You're supposed to be dead, Clark stammered. Funny thing about that, Preston said, pushing past Clark into the apartment. Turns out your boy Sean's not as thorough as you thought. Clark's apartment was a mess of conspiracy theories, surveillance equipment, and empty whiskey bottles. On the kitchen table lay a floor plan of Preston's house, detailed notes about his deployment schedule, and most damning of all, a life insurance policy application with Preston's forged signature. Let me guess, Preston said, studying the documents. You convince lonely military wives that their husbands are expendable. Sean moves in, establishes a relationship, then arranges an accident overseas. The wife collects insurance money. You take a cut. Clark's silence was confirmation enough. How many times have you done this, Donald? I want a lawyer. Preston laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. You think this is a legal proceeding? You conspire to murder a federal operator and abuse his child. This isn't a courtroom, Donald. This is a reckoning. 10 minutes later, Preston had everything. Names, dates, bank accounts. Sean and Kelly weren't just opportunistic predators. They were part of a sophisticated operation targeting military families. 3 other wives in the past 2 years. 3 other husbands who'd died in mysterious overseas accidents. 3 other children who'd simply vanished from the records. Your boy Sean specializes in disposing of inconvenient kids. Clark had sobbed before Preston left him unconscious on his apartment floor. Makes it look like accidents. Runaways. That's why they needed Nathan gone. Can't have witnesses to Daddy's death. Preston sat in his car outside Clark's building, processing the magnitude of what he'd uncovered. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a systematic murder operation. His wife hadn't just chosen another man. She'd chosen to become an accessory to multiple homicides. The cold rage that had been building since Nathan's rescue crystallized into something sharper. These people had killed before. They would have killed Preston, killed Nathan, and moved on to the next family without conscience or regret. Preston made a call. Glenn, I need the team. How many? All of them. And I need them dark. No official channels, no oversight. Preston, what did you find? A cancer that needs cutting out. And I'm going to need more than a scalpel. Chapter 5, Allies and Shadows. The abandoned warehouse in Norfolk had been Task Force 117th's unofficial meeting place for years. When Preston arrived at midnight, 11 men were waiting, the deadliest collection of human beings ever assembled in one room. Glenn Booker, demolitions expert who could turn a toothpick into an explosive. Marco Banks, sniper who'd once taken out 3 targets with 1 bullet. Joseph Peters, psychological warfare specialist who could break minds without leaving marks. Each man had committed acts that would horrify civilized society in service of a country that would deny their existence if captured. Gentlemen, Preston began, I need to tell you about Sean Knapp. For 30 minutes, Preston laid out the conspiracy. The murdered soldiers, the insurance fraud, the systematic targeting of military families. When he finished, the room was silent. How many children? Asked Joseph Peters. 7 that we know of. Nathan would have been the 8th. Marco Banks, a father of 3, spoke first. What do you need? I need Sean Knapp and Kelly Marshall to disappear. But first, I need them to suffer. I need them to know exactly why they're dying and who's killing them. Glenn leaned forward. This isn't official task force business. No, Preston agreed. This is personal. Anyone who doesn't want to participate. Shut up, said Eugene Diaz, their communications specialist. You think any of us would walk away from this? These bastards killed soldiers, murdered children. They're enemies of the United States. More than that, added Stanley McClure, their infiltration expert. They're predators who turned military service into a hunting ground. They made our deployments into their opportunity. Preston felt something loosen in his chest, the fear that he might have to handle this alone. These men understood. They'd all left families behind when they deployed, trusting in the system to protect what mattered most. The betrayal Kelly and Sean represented was an attack on every military family. What's the plan? Glenn asked. Preston spread a map of Millbrook County on the table. Sean thinks he's the hunter. We're going to show him what it feels like to be prey. Over the next 2 hours, they planned an operation more complex than most government-sanctioned missions. Phase 1, isolation. Cut Sean and Kelly off from outside support. Eliminate their escape routes. Make them completely dependent on each other. Phase 2, psychological pressure. Make them paranoid, fearful, uncertain of what was real. Phase 3, the revelation. Show them exactly who Preston Marshall was and what he was capable of. Phase 4, justice. What about Donald Clark? Marco asked. Clark's already handled, Preston replied. He'll spend the rest of his life in a military prison, assuming he survives long enough to get there. And Kelly? Joseph asked. She's still technically a military spouse. Preston's expression didn't change. Kelly forfeited any protection when she conspired to murder her husband and child. She's an enemy combatant now. The team dispersed at dawn, each man with specific assignments. Preston returned to the hospital to find Nathan awake and asking for breakfast. Daddy, are the bad people going away now? Very soon, son. But first, we need to make sure they can never hurt anyone else. Other kids like me? Preston nodded. Other kids exactly like you. Nathan considered this with the seriousness only children could bring to complex moral questions. Good. They shouldn't hurt kids. That afternoon, Phase 1 began. Sean's new truck developed engine trouble on his way to the store. Sugar in the gas tank, courtesy of Russ Ward's midnight visit. Sean's bank accounts suddenly showed suspicious activity, triggering fraud investigations. Eugene's expertise with financial systems. Kelly's nursing supervisor received an anonymous tip about drug theft. False, but enough to trigger an investigation that would keep her busy. By evening, Sean and Kelly were stranded at Preston's house, cut off from money and transportation, with Kelly facing suspension from work pending investigation. Preston watched from across the street as Sean paced angrily in the living room while Kelly sat at the kitchen table, talking rapidly on her phone. Even from a distance, Preston could read their body language, stress, fear, the first cracks in their confidence. His phone buzzed with a text from Glenn. Phase 1 complete. They're trapped. Preston typed back. Begin Phase 2. Chapter 6. The Pressure Mounts. The psychological campaign began at 3 a.m. Kelly woke to the sound of Nathan crying, his voice coming through the baby monitor they'd kept from when he was younger. But Nathan was safely sleeping at the hospital, miles away. Eugene's voice modulation equipment could replicate any sound, and the boy's cries echoing through the dark house sent Kelly stumbling through rooms, searching for a child who wasn't there. Sean found her in Nathan's empty bedroom, shaking. "I heard him," she whispered. "He was crying for help." "There's no one here," Sean snapped, but Preston could see through the surveillance cameras that the man was rattled too. The next night, Sean's laptop displayed photos of Preston in full tactical gear, face painted for war, holding weapons that weren't in any public database. The photos vanished when Sean tried to save them, but the message was clear: you have no idea who you're dealing with. On the third night, Kelly's phone rang every hour from Nathan's number, the boy pleading for his mommy to come find him in the woods, lost and scared. When Kelly tried to call back, the number was disconnected. By day 4, they were barely speaking to each other. Sean had started drinking heavily. Kelly jumped at every sound. The surveillance cameras showed them checking locks obsessively, looking over their shoulders, arguing in harsh whispers. "They're breaking," Glenn reported. Kelly tried to leave twice. Her car won't start. Sean called 3 different mechanics. None will come out to the house. "How's their communication with outside?" "Severed. Sean's phone only gets calls from numbers we control. Kelly's been suspended from work. Their internet randomly cuts out. They're completely isolated." Preston felt a cold satisfaction. Sean and Kelly were experiencing a fraction of what Nathan had endured. Fear, helplessness, the knowledge that no one was coming to help. On day 5, Preston made his move. He arrived at the house in full daylight, wearing his dress uniform with every ribbon and medal earned in a decade of classified operations. He knocked politely on the front door. Sean answered, haggard and suspicious. His eyes widened when he saw Preston, not the uncertain husband from their last meeting, but a decorated special operations soldier whose very bearing radiated lethal competence. "We need to talk," Preston said calmly. This time, Sean stepped aside immediately. Kelly emerged from the kitchen, stopping short when she saw Preston. "You look different." "I am different." Preston sat in his own living room like a conquering general. "Tell me, Kelly, what did you think I did overseas?" "Infantry. Regular Army stuff." Preston smiled. "I've never been regular Army. For the past 10 years, I've been part of a unit that doesn't officially exist. We handle problems that require permanent solutions." Sean found his voice. "You're trying to scare us." "No, Sean. I'm trying to educate you." Preston leaned back casually. "Do you know how many people I've killed?" The question hung in the air like smoke. 17 that I killed personally. Hundreds more that died because of operations I planned or led. Men who thought they were untouchable. Men who thought they could hurt innocent people without consequences. Kelly's face had gone pale. "Preston, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. Because you and Sean have been planning to murder me and my son. And in my world, that makes you legitimate targets." Sean jumped up, reaching for the gun Preston knew he kept in the kitchen drawer. He was fast, but Preston was faster. Before Sean could clear the doorway, Preston was behind him, one hand controlling Sean's gun arm, the other pressed against his carotid artery. "Sit down," Preston said quietly, and Sean's legs gave out as Preston released pressure on his throat. Kelly was frozen, watching her lover collapse like a broken toy. "Here's what's going to happen," Preston continued conversationally. "You're going to tell me about Donald Clark. about the other families you've destroyed, about the children you've murdered. And then you're going to beg me for a mercy you never showed them. Sean coughed, gasping for air. We never killed any kids. No. Preston pulled out his phone, showing them crime scene photos from Donald Clark's files. 7 children, Sean. 7 babies who had the misfortune of being inconvenient to your operation. Kelly stared at the photos, her face cycling through shock, recognition, and finally understanding. Oh God. Oh God. Sean, you told me they were just relocations. You said the kids went to relatives. Shut up. Sean snarled, but his authority was gone. He was no longer the confident predator who dominated Preston's home. He was prey, and he knew it. Preston sat back down, completely relaxed. Now we're going to have a conversation about justice. And Sean? Kelly? I promise you're going to find it educational. Chapter 7. Truth and Consequences. Preston had learned patience in the killing fields of 3 continents. He could wait days for the perfect shot, weeks for the right moment to strike. But sitting in his own living room, watching the 2 people who'd tortured his son and planned his murder, patience was a luxury he no longer needed. Sean, Preston said conversationally, tell Kelly about the Hernandez boy. Sean's face went gray. I don't know what. Preston showed him a photograph from Donald Clark's files. Miguel Hernandez, age 6. Father was a Marine stationed in Afghanistan. You and a woman named Tasha Anderson, your previous mark, convinced his mother that Miguel would be better off with his abusive father dead. The boy was found in a drainage canal 3 weeks later. Kelly stared at Sean with growing horror. You said you'd never hurt children. You said those kids went to foster care. I did what was necessary, Sean snapped, but his voice cracked. Those kids would have grown up to ask questions, would have remembered their fathers. It was cleaner this way. Cleaner, Preston repeated. That's what you called murdering a 6-year-old. Clean. Preston stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back like an officer reviewing troops. Tell her about the others, Sean. Tell her about little Rebecca Ward, age 4. About Tommy Chun, age 8. Tell Kelly what you did to them before you killed them. Sean's silence was answer enough. Kelly pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming. You're a monster, she whispered. Oh God, I helped a monster. No. Kelly. Preston turned back to face them. You are a monster. You didn't just help, you participated. You chose targets. You seduced husbands to learn their schedules, their weaknesses. You've gathered intelligence on children to plan their disposal. Preston pulled out a recording device. This is a conversation between you and Donald Clark, recorded 3 weeks ago. Would you like to hear yourself discussing the best way to make Nathan's death look accidental? Kelly's composure cracked completely. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought we'd just take the money and leave. I didn't know about the children until when? Preston's voice was deadly quiet. Until last month, when Sean showed me the photos. As trophies, Kelly looked at Sean with disgust and terror. He kept pictures of them. The dead children. He said it proved he could handle any problem. Sean surged to his feet, face twisted with rage. You weak bitch. You were happy enough to take the money. Happy enough to let me discipline Nathan when he got in the way. Discipline, Preston repeated. Is that what you called beating my 8-year-old son with a belt? Starving him when he cried? Abandoning him in the woods to die? Preston moved faster than either of them could follow. His fist connected with Sean's solar plexus, dropping the man to the floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Let me explain something to both of you, Preston said, voice still calm. I've spent 10 years hunting the worst humanity has to offer. Warlords who use child soldiers. Dictators who murdered their own people. Terrorists who targeted schools and hospitals. But you know what? Most of them believed they were fighting for something. They had causes, however twisted. Preston knelt beside Sean, who was still struggling to breathe. You don't even have that excuse. You killed children for money. You tortured my son for fun. You're worse than terrorists, Sean. You're parasites. Kelly found her voice. Preston, please. I know I don't deserve mercy, but I was manipulated. Were you manipulated when you told the sheriff my son should have died in those woods? Preston's eyes never left hers. Were you manipulated when you filed false death papers to steal my life insurance? Were you manipulated when you watched Sean beat Nathan and did nothing to stop it? Kelly had no answer. Preston stood, checking his watch. In 15 minutes, the local police will receive an anonymous tip about suspicious activity at this address. They'll find Donald Clark's files, evidence of the murder conspiracy, and proof of child abuse. Sean will be arrested on multiple charges. Sean managed to gasp out words. What about her? Kelly has a choice to make. Preston looked at his wife. Former wife, he corrected himself. The woman in front of him was a stranger wearing a familiar face. She can run. She has 15 minutes to disappear forever. New identity, new life, constant fear that one day I'll decide she's too much of a loose end. Or, Kelly whispered, or she can stay and face justice. Prison for conspiracy, child endangerment, insurance fraud. Maybe 20 years if she cooperates against the larger network. Kelly looked between Preston and Sean, understanding dawning. You're letting me choose. I'm giving you more mercy than you ever showed Nathan. More than you showed those 7 dead children. Sean struggled to his knees. You can't do this. I have rights. Preston's laugh was like breaking glass. Rights? You think this is about legal rights? He knelt down to Sean's level. This is about consequence. For 10 years, I've been the consequence for people who think they're above accountability. Preston pulled out his phone and showed Sean a video. Surveillance footage from the warehouse where 7 bodies were being prepared for transport to a remote burial site. Every person who participated in your network is already dead. Sean, Donald Clark, your financial backers, the other women who played Kelly's role in previous operations. All of them. Dead. You're the last one alive. Sean's face went white. You murdered them? I executed war criminals, Preston corrected. People who targeted American service members and their families. In my world, that's an act of war. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Preston checked his watch again. Time's up, Kelly. What's your choice? Chapter 8. The Final Hunt. Kelly ran. Preston had expected she would. Despite everything, the evidence of her complicity, the recordings of her planning Nathan's death, the cold calculation with which she'd betrayed her own family, Kelly still believed she could escape consequences through manipulation and self-preservation. Sean, handcuffed and loaded into a police car, screamed threats and accusations as the vehicle pulled away. But his words were meaningless now. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and his association with the murdered members of the conspiracy would ensure he never saw freedom again. Preston stood in his driveway, watching the police process what had been his home. It would never be home again. Too much blood had been spilled here. Too many lies had taken root. He and Nathan would start fresh somewhere else. But first, Preston had one last target to acquire. Kelly had a 3-hour head start, but Preston had advantages she couldn't imagine. Satellite surveillance, facial recognition networks, financial tracking systems that could trace a dollar bill to its last transaction. The United States government had spent billions developing ways to find people who didn't want to be found, and Preston had access to all of it. She made it as far as Jacksonville before he caught up. The motel was typical of places people went to disappear, pay by cash, no questions asked clientele that minded their own business. Kelly had checked in under a false name, but Preston's facial recognition software had spotted her at a gas station 6 miles away. He knocked on her door at midnight. Hello, Kelly. She'd been sleeping, but snapped awake at his voice. Through the thin motel door, he could hear her moving, probably looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Preston, how did you find me? The same way I found the others. The same way I'll always find you, no matter where you run. The door opened slowly. Kelly looked haggard, older than her 32 years. Fear had aged her in ways that makeup couldn't hide. I chose to run, she said. You said I could run. I said you could try. Preston stepped into the small room, noting the single bag, the maps spread on the bed, the desperate planning of someone who finally understood the magnitude of her situation. But Kelly, you misunderstood something fundamental. What? I was never going to let you go free. You participated in the murder of 7 children. You torture my son. You try to have me killed. Preston's voice was conversational, almost gentle. Did you really think I'd just let you disappear to do it again to some other family? Kelly backed against the far wall. You said I had a choice. You did. Prison or running. Both in the same way, with you paying for what you've done. I was manipulated. Sean convinced me. Stop. Preston's command cut through her excuses like a blade. I've heard your phone calls with Donald Clark. I've read your text messages planning Nathan's death. I know about the insurance policies you researched, the lawyers you consulted about inheriting my military benefits. Preston pulled out a chair and sat down, completely relaxed. You weren't manipulated, Kelly. You were recruited. Someone identified you as a person with no conscience, no maternal instincts, no capacity for genuine love. Someone who could watch children die and feel nothing but inconvenience. Kelly's composure cracked. That's not true. I loved Nathan. You told a sheriff that your 8-year-old son should have died in the woods because he carried loser's blood. Preston's voice remained calm, but his eyes were arctic. Those were your words, Kelly. About our child. I was upset. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Preston stood, towering over her in the small room. And that's why you can never be allowed to hurt another child. Kelly's eyes darted toward the window, calculating escape routes. What are you going to do? Why should I have done years ago? Why would I have done if I'd known what you really were? Preston reached into his jacket and Kelly flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a photograph. Nathan, smiling, taken the day before Preston's last deployment. Look at him, Preston commanded. Look at the child you were willing to let die for money. Kelly glanced at the photo and looked away immediately. Preston, please. You can't even look at him, can you? Your own son. Because looking at him means acknowledging what you are. Preston put the photo away and pulled out his phone. I'm going to give you one last choice, Kelly. A real choice this time. What choice? You can take your own life, quickly, painlessly, with some small measure of dignity intact. Or I can kill you myself, the way I killed the others. Preston's thumb hovered over a contact labeled cleanup. If I make the call, your death won't be quick or painless. It will be justice for 7 murdered children. Kelly stared at him, finally understanding that all her manipulation, all her tears and excuses were powerless here. Preston Marshall wasn't a mark to be seduced or a victim to be deceived. He was something she'd never encountered before, a predator more dangerous than Sean, more ruthless than Donald Clark, more implacable than the system she'd thought she could game. You're going to murder me, she whispered. I'm going to execute a war criminal, Preston corrected. Someone who targeted American service members and murdered American children. The only question is whether you face that execution with courage or cowardice. Kelly looked around the motel room one last time, at the maps that would never lead to freedom, at the false identity documents that would never protect her, at the small bag containing everything left of her life. Nathan, she said finally, will you tell him I'm sorry? Preston considered this. No, Nathan will grow up believing his mother died years ago. He'll never know about your betrayal, your choices, or your crimes. He'll remember you as someone who loved him before she was taken away by circumstances beyond her control. Tears streamed down Kelly's face, the first genuine emotion Preston had seen from her in years. That's mercy. That's for Nathan, not for you. Preston checked his watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. Chapter 9, Blood Debts Paid. 3 months later, Preston Marshall sat in a new house in a new state, watching Nathan play in a backyard that belonged to them alone. The boy was healthier now. The haunted look was fading from his eyes, replaced by the natural curiosity of childhood returning. Daddy, Nathan called from his swing set. Will you push me higher? Preston set aside the newspaper, which contained a small article about Kelly Marshall, military widow, found dead in a Florida motel from an apparent suicide, and walked over to his son. How high do you want to go? Higher than the trees. Higher than the clouds. Preston pushed the swing, watching Nathan soar against a blue sky unmarked by the shadows of their past. The boy's laughter was pure, innocent, free from the fear that had haunted him for months. The official story was simple. Kelly Marshall, distraught over her husband's death in action, had spiraled into depression and addiction. Her boyfriend, Sean Knapp, had been revealed as an abusive criminal who'd taken advantage of her vulnerability. The tragic end to a military family destroyed by the pressures of deployment and predatory manipulation. Only Preston knew the truth. Only Preston carried the weight of what had really happened in that Florida motel room. Kelly had chosen dignity in the end. She'd taken the pills Preston provided, quick, painless, leaving no evidence of murder. Her final words had been a message for Nathan that Preston would never deliver. Tell him I loved him before I became this. But Preston had been right. Nathan would never know about his mother's true nature. The boy would grow up believing in the sanitized version of events, protected from truths that would only bring pain. Sean Knapp was serving consecutive life sentences for multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder, child abuse, and racketeering. He would die in prison, forgotten by everyone except the families of his victims, who would visit his grave periodically to confirm he was still dead. Donald Clark had died in military custody, officially a suicide, though the guards on duty that night had been Task Force 117 members who understood the value of justice over bureaucracy. The wider conspiracy was finished. 12 other members of the network had been quietly eliminated over the course of 2 months. No trials, no appeals, no possibility of escape or reduced sentences. Just permanent solutions to a permanent problem. "Daddy, look how high I am." Preston smiled at his son, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. Nathan was safe. The predators were dead. The debts were paid. That evening, after Nathan was asleep, Preston sat on his porch with a glass of whiskey and his secure phone. Glenn Booker called from wherever Task Force 117 was operating now. "How's civilian life treating you?" Glenn asked. "Better than expected. Nathan's doing well. We're both doing well. Any regrets about leaving the team?" Preston considered this. He'd submitted his resignation the day after Kelly's death, choosing to become a full-time father rather than continue a career that had cost him so much. "None. My war's over, Glenn. I fought the only battle that ever really mattered. The one for your son. The one for my family. Or what's left of it." Glenn was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, Preston, what you did, it was justice. Those people were predators. They would have killed again. I know." Preston watched stars emerge in the darkening sky. "But it wasn't about justice, Glenn. It was about consequences. For 10 years, I've been teaching people that actions have consequences. Sometimes the lesson is the last thing they ever learn. And now I teach Nathan how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to be strong without being cruel." Preston finished his whiskey. "How to be the kind of man who protects instead of destroys. Think you'll ever come back to the team?" Preston looked through the window at Nathan's room, where nightlights kept the darkness at bay and stuffed animals stood guard against nightmares. "No, I've got a different mission now, one that matters more than anything I've ever done." After the call ended, Preston walked through his new house, checking locks and security systems with the thoroughness of a man who knew how easily safety could be shattered. But these weren't the paranoid preparations of someone living in fear. They were the careful precautions of a protector safeguarding what mattered most. In Nathan's room, Preston adjusted the boy's blankets and kissed his forehead. Nathan stirred slightly, muttering in his sleep. Not the terrified whimpers of months past, but the normal murmurs of childhood dreams. "Sleep well, son," Preston whispered. "The monsters are all gone now." And they were. Every last one of them. Preston Marshall had spent a decade hunting evil in the darkest corners of the world. But the greatest evil he'd ever faced had been sleeping in his own bed, sharing his own name, threatening the one person who mattered more than life itself. That evil was dead now, buried and forgotten, erased from Nathan's future as thoroughly as if it had never existed. For the first time in years, Preston Marshall slept peacefully through the night, knowing that justice had been served and his family was safe. Some debts could only be paid in blood. Some monsters could only be stopped by bigger monsters. And some fathers would burn the world to protect their children. Preston Marshall had done all three and felt no regret for any of it. The war was over. He had won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.